Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Welcome to tonight's program. And now for the headlines.
Moderna announced its experimental vaccine against COVID-19 was shown to be 94.5% effective, according to early results from a clinical trial with more than 30,000 participants.
Storm Vanco barreled into Vietnam on Sunday, damaging buildings and injuring at least 5 people as death toll in the Philippines climbed to 69.
And Hurricane Iota rapidly strengthened into a dangerous Category 4 as it headed towards Central America on Monday. The U.S. National Hurricane Center warned 2 weeks after powerful storm Iota devastated much of the region and left more than 200 people dead or missing.
Bombs through their suit.
And 4 astronauts successfully launched on the SpaceX Crew Dragon Resilience to the International Space Station, the first of what the U.S. hopes will be many routine missions following a successful test flight in late spring.
So unique in that we are now going into...
First, in the Philippines, the death toll due to Typhoon Ulysses, which lashed Luzon, has reached 69, as those affected by the typhoon reached 1.1 million individuals, according to the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. And the RRMC Executive Director, Undersecretary Ricardo Halad, said that the typhoon fatalities came from 6 regions in Luzon. Only the Ilocos region didn't report any death. The highest number of fatalities came from Cagayan Valley, which experienced the worst flooding in more than 4 decades, followed by Calabarzon and the Cordilleras. The affected population were 1.1 million individuals, or almost 286,000 families. Typhoon Ulysses, he said, also damaged more than 3,000 houses. On the damage to agriculture, the initial estimate is almost 1 billion pesos, while for the infrastructure, 253 million pesos. Mr. Halad said that days before the typhoon made landfall in the country, they've already issued instructions to local government units to do preemptive evacuation of residents in the areas expected to be hit by the typhoon. Typhoon Ulysses hit hard areas which had already been ravaged by 2 previous strong typhoons. It came only 2 weeks after Super Typhoon Rolly or Goni pummeled Luzon, especially the Bicol region, and after Typhoon Quinta, which had also hit areas in Luzon, which were affected by Ulysses. Office of Civil Defense Action Regional Director for Cagayan Valley, Harold Cabrero, said that in Region 2 alone, the fatalities reached 24, and 14 of these were due to landslide, 7 through drowning, and 3 due to electrocution. Some also died after a landslide buried a house near the Cagayan River bank, particularly in Bagao. Halad said that the NDRRMC had conducted aerial rapid assessment over Metro Manila in Region 2.
An executive order to form a Build Back Better task force that would implement immediate solutions to disaster rehabilitation and recovery of typhoon-hit areas is currently being drafted, according to Malacanang. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque made this remark after President Duterte on Saturday ordered the creation of a task force to fast-track the distribution of assistance to victims of successive typhoons. Watch this.
Na task force para sa mabilis na rehabilitasyon ng mga nasirang mga komunidad. Sinabi rin ng ating Pangulo na may higit 1 milyong piso na assistance ang naibigay sa Region 2 ng DSWD, LGUs at non-governmental organizations. At para maiwasan maulit ang ganitong kalamidad, ayon sa Pangulo, ay papalakasin ang forest protection efforts laban sa illegal logging at illegal mining. Inasahan niya na ang gagawin ng mga lokal na pamahalaan ang kanilang parte. Ayon naman kay Department of Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi, kayang maibalik ang ilaw sa probinsya ng Cagayan sa loob ng 2 araw kapag bumaba na ang tubig ng baha at matapos ang inspeksyon. Pinag-utos naman ng Pangulo kay DNR Secretary Roy Cimatu na tignan ang link ng pagguho ng lupa o landslide sa Cagayan sa illegal na pagmimina. Pagdating naman sa flood control initiatives ng DNR, sinuportahan ito ng Pangulo. Kabilang sa mga plano ng DNR ay ang pag-alis ng bottleneck sa Magapit River sa Cagayan na nagdudulot ng matinding pagbaha tuwing panahon ng bagyo, lalong-lalo na po dyan sa munisipalidad ng Alcala. Isa pang plano ay ang dredging ng Cagayan River na apektado ng heavy siltation. Titignan din ng DNR ang pagpapatupad ng massive tree planting program.
Secretary Roque said the task force will be headed by Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea with representatives from various agencies as members, including the Departments of Agriculture, Public Works and Highways, Budget and Management, and Social Welfare and Development, National Irrigation Administration, National Electrification Administration, National Housing Authority, among others. The Philippine Air Force, Philippine Navy, and the Philippine Coast Guard must provide assistance to the task force, he said. Local government units, he said, will also be called to render assistance to the task force in carrying out its mandate. Roque said the task force was simply to stress that someone has to be in charge with the full assistance of the entire cabinet. He also explained that the creation of a more permanent body that will focus and develop expertise on post-disaster rehabilitation and recovery of typhoon-hit areas is necessary since a proposed legislation creating the Department of Disaster Resilience, or DDR, has yet to be enacted into law. The House of Representatives approved its version of the DDR last September, while similar measures remain pending in the Senate.
Meanwhile, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council on Monday has approved a resolution recommending to President Duterte to place the entire Luzon under a state of calamity following the widespread damage caused by Super Typhoon Rolly and Typhoons Quinta and Ulysses. The NDRRMC approved the declaration during an emergency meeting, which also discussed the impacts of the recent typhoons and early recovery actions. It was approved during the meeting, the recommendation for President Duterte to place under state of calamity the entire Luzon to address the impacts of the latest typhoons that hit the country, according to NDRRMC Executive Director Ricardo Halad in a statement. It was also agreed during the meeting to convene a technical working group of the Joint Prevention, Mitigation and Preparedness Clusters of the NDRRMC to assess the current dam management. Halad said Pag-asa was also instructed by NDRRMC Chairperson and Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana, who led the meeting, to revisit its historical data to strengthen warnings beforehand. Other matters raised by Lorenzana to NDRRMC member agencies were the provision of assistance to the affected farmers and fisherfolk, road clearing, shelter requirements, and other recovery interventions. The meeting was held via teleconference, joined by various agencies and several local government chief executives.
In a situation briefing on the impact of Typhoon Ulysses in Tuguegarao City in Cagayan this Sunday, Housing and Urban Development Coordinating Council Secretary Eduardo Del Rosario said they will provide 5,000 to 10,000 pesos in assistance to the victims of the previous storm. Watch this.
Ilan ba talaga nawala anong bahay? Have you, is there a count of the house is totally lost?
Mr. President.
Beyond repair.
Yes, Mr. President. Here in Region 2, I was talking to Governor Mamba earlier kung mayroon ng bilang yung mga partially and totally damaged in Region 2. And I was told na wala pa po, Mr. President, dahil nakalubog pa yung mga bahay, wala pang assessment silang nagagawa. We will be creating an interagency team para mag-conduct sir ng assessment to be led by the Office of Civil Defense. Kasama po rito ang Department of Human Settlements, ang National Housing Authority, and DSWD para malaman yung particular houses and owners na bibigyan natin ng financial assistance.
The Office of Civil Defense will lead the assessment of the affected households, including the HUDCC, the National Housing Authority, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, and the affected local government units in the country.
Meanwhile, Storm Vanco barreled into Vietnam on Sunday, damaging buildings and injuring at least 5 people after wreaking devastation in the Philippines. The storm made landfall on Sunday morning with winds of up to 90 kilometers per hour, according to media reports, uprooting trees and blowing the roofs of houses and schools. Vanco is the latest in a series of storms that have pummeled Vietnam over the past 6 weeks, causing flooding and landslides that have killed at least 159 people and left 70 others missing. Initial reports from the Disaster Management Authority said that 5 people were injured while they were trying to secure their houses. Vanco has weakened since hitting the Philippines as a typhoon with winds of up to 155 kph, but state media said it had still caused significant damage, though details were not immediately available.
A magnitude 6 quake jolted Surigao del Sur on Monday, or earlier today, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology reported. The tectonic quake struck 29 kilometers southeast of the municipality of San Agustin at 6:37 local time and had a depth of 33 kilometers. Intensity 5 was felt in the city of Bislig, Surigao del Sur, Rosario, Agusan del Sur, and intensity 4 in Caguait, city of Tandag, Bayabas, Surigao del Sur. Intensity 3 was reported in Cagayan de Oro City, Tagaloan, Villanueva, Balingasag, Misamis Oriental, and intensity 2 in El Salvador City, Initao, Luwagit, Manticao, Misamis Oriental, Virac, Catanduanes. Intensity 1 was felt in Iligan City. The following instrumental intensities were also recorded. Intensity 4, Bislig City, Surigao del Sur. Intensity 3, Gingoog City, Misamis Oriental. Intensity 2, Cagayan de Oro City, Surigao City, Surigao del Norte. Intensity 1, Alabel, Sarangani, Coronadal, Tupi, South Cotabato, Kidapawan City, Palo Leyte, Borongan City. Both aftershocks and damages are expected from this quake. In an advisory, FIVOLC said the earthquake that occurred in offshore Surigao del Sur has no tsunami threat.
Fifteen Asia-Pacific countries on Sunday signed the world's biggest free trade deal, seen as a huge coup for China in extending its influence. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, includes 10 Southeast Asian economies along with China, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia, with members accounting for around 30% of global GDP. Take a look.
Khuôn khổ hợp tác mới của Hiệp định RCEP sẽ góp phần đẩy mạnh tiến trình xây dựng cộng đồng kinh tế ASEAN 2025. Từ đó, ASEAN sẽ trở thành đối tác năng động, mạnh mẽ, hợp tác vì sự thịnh vượng. Tôi tin tưởng rằng Hiệp định RCEP sẽ sớm được các nước phê chuẩn và đưa vào thực thi trong thời gian tới, góp phần hỗ trợ quá trình phục hồi kinh tế sau đại dịch Covid-19 và đem lại thịnh vượng chung cho người dân, cho doanh nghiệp của tất cả các nước thành viên. Xin
The agreement to lower tariffs and open up the services trade within the bloc doesn't include the United States and is viewed as a Chinese-led alternative to a now-defunct Washington Trade Initiative. Many of the signatories are battling severe coronavirus outbreaks, and they're also hoping the RCEP will help mitigate the crippling economic costs of the illness. Indonesia recently tumbled into its first recession for 2 decades, while the Philippine economy shrunk by 11.5% on year in the latest quarter. India pulled out of the agreement last year over concerns about cheap Chinese goods entering the country and was a notable absentee during Sunday's virtual signing. It can join at a later date if it chooses. Even without India, the deal covers more than 2 billion people. Crucially, it should help shrink costs and make life easier for companies by letting them export products anywhere within the bloc without meeting separate requirements for each country. The agreement touches on intellectual property, but environmental protections and labor rights are not part of the pact. The deal is also seen as a way for China to draft the rules of trade in the region after years of U.S. retreat under President Trump, which have seen Washington pull out of a trade pact of its own, the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Tổng thư ký ASEAN. Ladies and gentlemen, we have completed the sign.
Vietnamese Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc concludes the four-day ASEAN summit in Hanoi, which was held online due to coronavirus, by handing over the chairmancy to Brunei and saying that ASEAN always keep the door open for India to rejoin the process of RCEP. Speaking...
4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, the gavel of ASEAN Chairmanship has officially been handed over to Brunei Darussalam, Chair of ASEAN 2021. Please give a big applause to
Speaking at the closing ceremony, Vietnamese Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc said that leaders of ASEAN countries discussed and agreed on a range of drastic and practical measures to boost cooperation to respond to and overcome challenges facing the bloc, including the COVID-19 pandemic, and to make the ASEAN community become stronger and truly become a nucleus of the region with people always put at the center. The summits agreed on important contents, thus creating a new driver for relations between ASEAN and its partners and reaffirming strong commitments to multilateral cooperation as well as economic linkages and liberalization. The Vietnamese leader added that during these summits, leaders of participating countries reached consensus on numerous important decisions, including the midterm review of ASEAN Community Vision 2025 blueprints, reviewing the implementation of the ASEAN Charter, and approving the Hanoi Declaration on post-2025 ASEAN Community Vision.
Tiếp theo chương trình là lễ chuyển giao vai trò Chủ tịch ASEAN cho Brunei.
And we'll take a short break. Eagle News, we'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by RJK Services Manpower Agency Corporation.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Less than 2 weeks after powerful storm Iota killed more than 200 people across Central America, authorities warned that Hurricane Iota was set to wallop coastal areas of Nicaragua and Honduras today. As of 0300 GMT Sunday, Iota, the latest in an unusually busy storm season, was about 440 miles east-southeast of the Cabo Gracias Adios on the Nicaragua-Honduras border, moving slowly westwards with maximum sustained winds of 75 miles per hour. Iota was upgraded to a hurricane early Sunday, the Miami-based National Hurricane Center said. Iota is projected to hit the Colombian island of Providencia by late Sunday, U.S. time, and is expected to rapidly strengthen into a major hurricane as it approaches Central America. Honduras, Guatemala, and Nicaragua announced evacuations last Friday, even as the region was still reeling from the devastation inflicted by Iota. Iota's heavy rains burst river banks and triggered landslides as far as North Chiapas, Mexico. The National Hurricane Center warned that Iota would deposit as much as 16 inches of rain on Honduras, northern Nicaragua, eastern Guatemala, and southern Belize, with isolated totals of up to 30 inches. Iota was the 28th named storm of this year's hurricane season, tying the 2005 record for named storms on Sunday. Theta, the 29th, was weakening over the far eastern Atlantic. It was expected to become a remnant low, according to forecasters. The official end of hurricane season is November 30.
Rescues are underway in the U.S. state of North Carolina, where at least 3 people are missing following floods at a campground in Taylorsville, according to Alexander County officials. Iyota's moisture combined with a cold front Thursday, which resulted in copious amounts of rain that caused some of the worst flooding in parts of Virginia and North Carolina since 1995. A flash flood emergency was issued for parts of North Carolina on Thursday, where many rescues were reported. Iota is finally gone Friday, but there are still flood warnings in Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina due to rising rivers. Some rivers will not crest until this week. Iota hit the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua as a Category 4 storm and was one of the strongest November storms ever recorded.
In other news, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus warned during an executive board meeting that a vaccine against COVID-19 on its own will not end the pandemic. The pandemic is raging months after it broke out, with infections soaring past 54 million and claiming more than 1.3 million lives. Take a look.
We knew that a vaccine would be essential for bringing the pandemic under control, which is why WHO proposed the ACT Accelerator. But it's important to emphasize that a vaccine will complement the other tools we have, not replace them. A vaccine on its own will not end the pandemic. Surveillance will need to continue. People will still need to be tested, isolated, and cared for. Contacts will still need to be traced and quarantined. Communities will still need to be engaged, and individuals will still need to be careful. We still have a long road to travel.
The WHO's figures for Saturday showed that 660,905 coronavirus cases were reported to the UN Health Agency, setting a new high water mark. That number and the 645,410 registered on Friday surpassed the previous daily record high of 614,013 recorded on November 7.
In another coronavirus news, Moderna on Monday announced its experimental vaccine against COVID-19 was shown to be 94.5% effective, according to early results from a clinical trial with more than 30,000 participants. This positive interim analysis from the Phase 3 study has given the first clinical validation that the vaccine can prevent COVID-19 disease, including severe disease. This according to Stephanie Bancel, Moderna's CEO. More than 30,000 people were tested in the U.S., with half being given 2 doses of the vaccine 4 weeks apart. The rest had dummy injections. The analysis was based on the first 95 to develop COVID-19 symptoms. Only 5 of the COVID-19 or COVID cases were in people given the vaccine. 90 were in those given the dummy treatment. The company says the vaccine is protecting 94.5%. The data also shows that there were 11 cases of severe COVID-19 in the trial, but none happened in people who were immunized. No significant safety concerns have also been reported.
Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson confirmed in a Twitter video that he has been asked to self-isolate for 14 days by the UK's test and trace system after coming into contact with someone who had COVID-19. The Prime Minister met a small group of MPs at Downing Street on Thursday for around 35 minutes, including one who subsequently developed symptoms of COVID-19 and has now tested positive. Take a look.
Hi folks, the good news is that NHS Test and Trace is working ever more efficiently. The bad news is that they've pinged me and I've got to self-isolate because somebody I was in contact with a few days ago has developed COVID. And it doesn't matter that we were all doing social distancing. It doesn't matter that I'm fit as a butcher's dog, feel great. So many people do in my circumstances. And actually, it doesn't matter that I've had the disease and I'm bursting with antibodies. We've got to interrupt the spread of the disease, and one of the ways we can do that now is by self-isolating for 14 days when you get contacted by NHS Test and Trace. Don't forget, we not only have this technique for interrupting the transmission of COVID, but we also now have two gigantic boxing gloves with which to wallop our foe into submission. Mass lateral flow testing, rapid turnaround testing of a kind that this country is leading the way in, and we've got tens of millions of these tests already. And of course, the prospect of a vaccine, which I hope will be able to start distributing to those who really need it.
He will carry on working from Downing Street, including on leading the government's response to the coronavirus pandemic, according to the Downing Street spokesman. His confinement comes as negotiations with the European Union over Brexit enters a decisive final sprint, with critical announcements being trialed ahead of Johnson's isolation by Downing Street to tackle the virus. Downing Street has not said how long Johnson will be in isolation for. However, the UK National Health Services rules state individuals should isolate for 14 days.
Now, the U.S. surpassed 11 million coronavirus cases on Sunday, adding 1 million new cases in less than a week, according to a tally by Johns Hopkins University. The dizzying rise came as cities and states across the United States were implementing new restrictions to try to halt the spread of the virus, with stay-at-home orders set to be imposed on Chicago on Monday. The U.S. had crossed the 10 million case threshold on Monday, November 9. As of 8:30 p.m. Sunday, just 6 days later, the Johns Hopkins University real-time tracker showed that the confirmed U.S. caseload stood at 11,038,312. There have been 246,224 deaths in the country. Both are the highest tolls in absolute terms in the world. The U.S. has seen a worrying surge in coronavirus cases since the start of November, forcing local and state officials from coast to coast to take more drastic steps to reduce the disease's spread, with many hospitals already warning that they are running out of resources.
Meanwhile, New York Governor Cuomo threatened lawsuits over a Trump vaccine plan. The New York governor says that the state of New York would sue President Trump's administration if the federal coronavirus vaccine distribution plan makes it harder for people of color to get vaccinated. The governor made the remarks at Riverside Church in Manhattan in the wake of President Trump's threats to block New York State from the upcoming COVID-19 vaccine.
I tell you today, if the Trump administration does not change this plan and does not provide an equitable vaccine process, we will enforce our legal rights. We will bring legal action to protect New Yorkers. There can be no more fundamental right in this moment than access to the vaccine. Any plan that intentionally burdens communities of color to hinder access to the vaccine deprives those communities of equal protection under the law, and equal protection is enshrined in the Constitution of these United States. I'm not going to allow New Yorkers to be bullied or to be abused. I'm not going to allow the injustice to continue.
Now, President Trump said Friday that the federal government is developing a plan to distribute the COVID-19 vaccine to all Americans as soon as April. But he singled out New York and Governor Cuomo in particular for calling for an independent panel to review any vaccine before it's distributed in the state.
With the exception of places like New York State, where, for political reasons, the governor decided to say, and I don't think it's good politically, I think it's very bad from a health standpoint, but he wants to take his time on the vaccine. He doesn't trust where the vaccine's coming from. These are coming from the greatest companies anywhere in the world, greatest labs in the world. But he doesn't trust the fact that it's this White House, this administration. So we won't be delivering it to New York until we have authorization to do so, and that pains me to say that. This is a very successful, amazing vaccine at 90% and more. But so the Governor Cuomo, will have to let us know when he's ready for it. Otherwise, we can't be delivering it to a state that won't be giving it to its people immediately. And I know the people of New York very well. I know they want it. So the governor will let us know when he's ready. He's had some very bad editorials recently about this statement and what's happened with respect to nursing homes and his handling of nursing homes. And I hope he doesn't handle this as badly as he's handled the nursing homes.
Still in the U.S., former President Barack Obama tells CBS's Sunday Morning that it is clear that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States, but adds that Donald Trump's delay in acknowledging that comes at a price. Watch this.
Personal for you, or did you just think, I've had it?
It wasn't personal. Actually,
You didn't have a I've had it moment?
The truth is, everything I said, I was just stating facts.
It was out of character for you to speak up, Mr. President, that way.
I was not the person who, in a White House briefing room, said, how is bleach the way to solve COVID? I wasn't doing a routine. I was repeating words that I heard. I think we were in a circumstance in this election in which certain norms, certain institutional values that are so extraordinarily important had been breached, that it was important for me as somebody who had served in that office to simply let people know this is not normal. What it says is that we are still deeply divided. The power of that alternative worldview that's presented in the media that those voters consume, it carries a lot of weight.
Are you worried about that?
Yes. It's very hard for our democracy to function if we are operating on just completely different sets of facts. Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. Kamala Harris will be the next vice president.
Something else that has contributed hugely to the issue, Mr. Obama says, is the spread of misinformation online, where facts don't matter. The example he uses here with Ms. Clinton relates to a fake theory alleging that Democratic politicians were running a pedophile ring out of a Washington pizza restaurant. Mr. Obama says that while many conventional mainstream media outlets have embraced fact-checking in recent years in an effort to tackle the spread of misinformation online, it is often not enough because falsehoods had already circled the globe by the time truth got out of the gates. Mr. Obama also said the issue of race has been one of the central fault lines in American history. He said the death of George Floyd, a black man who died in police custody, and the response to his death from communities, not just in the U.S. but around the world, created moments of both despair and optimism.
To Australia now, a sudden coronavirus cluster emerged in the Australian city of Adelaide after 7 months without a significant outbreak there, with the virus again escaping from the country's hotel quarantine system. South Australia State reported 4 cases had been detected in the city on Sunday before the cluster grew sharply overnight to 17 people Monday, the largest there since April. All but 2 of the 17 were members of the same large family, including one who was working in a hotel used to quarantine travelers returning from overseas. Authorities snapped back a swathe of coronavirus restrictions and suspended international flights into Adelaide. Officials ordered hundreds of people to isolate while closing linked schools and businesses. South Australia residents are being urged to wear masks, work from home, and avoid non-essential travel.
Austria's Chancellor Sebastian Kurz announces a return to tougher anti-coronavirus restrictions, including shutting schools and non-essential shops to contain spiraling second-wave infections. From Tuesday and until December 6, a new lockdown like the one from spring will be brought in, according to the Chancellor in a news conference. Kurz's administration imposed a partial lockdown 2 weeks ago, but that has not stopped cases rising and hitting a daily record Friday. The tightened measures will see social contact reduced to a minimum and people told to stay indoors, save for clearly defined reasons such as shopping, work, where working from home is not feasible, medical visits, and sport. Only shops selling essential items will be permitted to remain open, such as food stores, chemists, banks, and post offices. Primary and middle schools will switch to distance learning, senior schools and universities already having done so. The country has seen 831 confirmed cases per million inhabitants over the past 7 days, according to the Our World in Data website, as Austria jumped ahead of neighboring Czech Republic and Switzerland to top the global charts.
Meanwhile, here in the Philippines, a total of 45 new recovered cases were reported on Monday, and it pushed the overall tally of coronavirus disease recoveries nationwide to 374,366. In its latest case bulletin, the Department of Health also reported 1,738 new confirmed cases to bring the total number of active cases to 27,369. Of the active cases, about 83% are mild. 8.5% are asymptomatic, 3% are severe, 0.20% are moderate, and 5.3% are in critical condition. The majority of the new cases are from Davao City with 140, Cavite with 117, Rizal with 89, Laguna with 87, and Batangas with 79 infections. A DOH data based on November 15 report showed that 906 or 6% of the 15,210 who have tested turned out positive for COVID-19. The DOH also logged 7 deaths, bringing the country's toll to 7,839.
Cambodian government revises entry requirement for foreign travelers. Here's Crystal Ann Ballesteros. Crystal?
Hi, CJ. Good evening. The Cambodian government has revised the entry requirements for foreign travelers entering the kingdom, with varying measures depending on whether arrivals are sponsored or not. The announcement came via directive issued by Health Minister Man Bonheng, and I quote, "Foreign arrivals from China, Japan, South Korea, Thailand, Vietnam, the European Union, and the US who have a sponsor must produce a health certificate with negative COVID-19 results valid from within 72 hours of departure. They must then take a further test upon arrival and isolate in a hotel until the test results are released and show a negative result. They can leave. However, they will be required to submit a schedule of their actions before they leave, which will be kept by authorities, and they must then keep to that schedule." End of quote. The directive said that sponsors be an executive director, company shareholder, business association president, or investment project owner in a special economic zone who are responsible for all expenses of those they guarantee, including the cost of treatment if they test positive for coronavirus at any stage. Diplomats must also show a certificate to prove that they are virus-free within 72 hours of their departure, followed by a test upon arrival, and wait at least 24 hours at a hotel or quarantine facility while waiting for their results, the directive said. Meanwhile, arrivals from other countries or those who do not have sponsorship are not permitted to self-quarantine. They must stay at a government-designated hotel for a mandatory quarantine of 2 weeks, with the $2,000 deposit and mandatory health insurance still a requirement. In addition, Cambodians holding either a Cambodian or foreign passport must also undergo quarantine under the supervision of the state. They can choose to stay at the state-run quarantine centers for free or at a designated hotel where they will be charged at the same rate as foreigners. And that's the latest news here in Cambodia, CJ.
Yes, just a quick question. For those who are traveling, for the foreigners who are traveling with a sponsor, you said that they have to stay in a hotel for quarantine. Is this, are these hotels the choice of the foreigners, or do you have government-assigned hotels for that?
As I know, CJ, they can stay at the government-designated hotel, or they can choose their own, but they will shoulder the expenses for that hotel.
All right, thank you so much for that update. Please do stay safe out there, and we hope to hear more stories from you.
You too, CJ. Reporting live from Cambodia, I am Crystal Ann Ballesteros, and we live in interesting times.
To Hong Kong now, on event organizers, they came up with a plan to balance the anti-pandemic measures and city dwellers' thirst for outdoor entertainment. Dubbed the city's first purpose-built venue for the COVID-19 era, the grounds features 100 socially distanced private pods against the central district's skyline, each seating 2 or 4 people and keeping at least 1.5 meters from each other. The organizers say they have sold out tickets for the first 2 weeks for events including yoga classes, film screening, and even music shows. Take a look.
distance 唔會同隔離嗰個太 close 咯。因為我哋候咗屋企好耐啦，咁所以都想喺活動下，同埋呢度咧唔係 indoor 嘛，呢度 outdoor 咯，可以呼吸下新鮮。
Something new. I think in Hong Kong you don't get a lot of outdoor cinemas, and because of COVID, you know, the activities we have are very limited. So this is a breath of fresh air.
We still have more updates for you. Please don't go away.
This portion is brought to you by Canreef Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation and modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
World stock markets rallied Monday as bright economic data further boosted investor sentiment following last week's breakthrough coronavirus vaccine news. Equities also bounded higher after U.S. President-elect Joe Biden's team pledged not to impose an economically damaging nationwide lockdown to contain the virus, which has now infected more than 11 million Americans. In addition, traders cheered the signing of the world's biggest free trade deal by 15 Asia-Pacific countries, including Japan and China, that covers about a third of the world's GDP. Europe's main stock markets kicked off the week on a positive note, with London up 0.7% in late morning deals, while Frankfurt added 0.5% and Paris rose 1.1%. The dollar dipped against the euro and yen, while oil prices rebounded strongly to extend last week's vaccine-inspired gains. In Asia, Tokyo led the gains, jumping more than 2% on news that the world's number 3 economy had surged out of recession in the third quarter, expanding a forecast beating 5% thanks to a pickup in domestic demand and exports.
Japan's economy exited recession in the third quarter growing better than expected 5%, government data showed on Monday, following a record contraction. Now, a rise in domestic demand as well as exports helped drive the quarter-on-quarter growth after the coronavirus pandemic, and a consumption tax hike slammed the economy into reverse earlier in the year. The positive figures come after 3 quarters of contraction in the world's third largest economy, with revised data showing the economy shrank 8.2% in Q2, more than the previously estimated 7.9%. That was the worst figure for Japan since comparable data became available in 1980, exceeding even the brutal impact of the 2008 global financial crisis. The Q3 growth will be welcome news for Japan's government, which has avoided the tough lockdown measures seen in some other countries, as it tries to balance preventing the spread of coronavirus with protecting the economy.
Olympic chief Thomas Bach said Monday he is very confident that spectators will attend next year's Tokyo Olympics, as he kicked off a Japan trip to boost momentum for the pandemic-postponed games. Bach pledged the International Olympic Committee would work to ensure as many participants as next year's games as possible were vaccinated if a vaccine is available, but added that would not be a requirement for the event. Watch this.
All this makes us even more confident that we can have there next year a reasonable number of spectators in the stadia, and therefore enjoy the Olympic spirit. We have seen many sports events around the world who have been successfully organized and have given hope and certainty to the people. The athletes and the officials, the coaches, they all need to have the confidence that they are participating and competing in a safe environment, and that the same rules, regulations and restrictions are applied to all of them. So.
Organizers and Japanese officials have insisted they can hold the event and are drawing up a raft of coronavirus countermeasures intended to make the games safe, even if the pandemic is not over. Back on his first trip to Tokyo since the games were postponed in March, is hoping to persuade athletes, Japanese citizens and Olympic sponsors that the games can be held safely next year. Polls show a majority of Japan's public believe the games should be postponed further or cancelled altogether. And more than 60% of domestic sponsors have yet to commit to extending their contracts for another year, domestic media reported this weekend.
And 4 astronauts were successfully launched on the SpaceX Crew Dragon Resilience to the International Space Station on Sunday, the first of what the U.S. hopes will be many routine missions following a successful test flight in late spring. 3 Americans, Michael Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shannon Walker, and Japan's Soichi Noguchi, blasted off at 7:27 p.m. local time from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, thus ending almost a decade of international reliance on Russia for rides on its Soyuz rockets. Take a look.
Through their suit, air to help keep them cool.
So it's kind of like Run 2.
Right.
Really
rocket once
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And of course, for this mission, so unique in that we are now going into basically operational missions that are commercial in nature, where NASA is a customer. Our goal has been and will be to be one customer of many customers in a very robust commercial marketplace in low Earth orbit. But we also want to have numerous providers that are competing on cost and innovation and, of course, safety. We've seen amazing work from SpaceX already. There's more coming from Boeing. But I think this ecosystem, this very virtuous cycle of continuous development is going to pay benefits to the American taxpayer and space exploration.
Falcon 9 the launch looked beautiful. I don't have any specifics on any anomalies that we had, which is great. We'll get more data as we go. Dragon was dropped off roughly 12 minutes into the mission, into a beautiful orbit, and she's operating just fine, all systems nominal. Executed a burn, and I think there's 2 more to go. We approach the space station in a little over 24 hours from now, and then we'll be able to breathe a sigh of relief 26 or so hours from now, once we hand the crew over to NASA.
But we're not done yet. We need to keep going. That spacecraft's out there with those 4 precious crew members on them, and we're going to get them safely to the International Space Station tomorrow, right? And but it was a beautiful launch today, and really excited, and thank you.
We're on board. It is very significant for JAXA that astronaut Noguchi will board the first operational flight of Crew Dragon and launches from Kennedy Space Center. I believe that this is an outcome of the cooperation between NASA and JAXA.
SpaceX is scheduled to launch 2 more crewed flights for NASA in 2021, including 1 in the spring and 4 cargo refueling missions over the next 15 months. NASA turned to SpaceX and Boeing after shuttering the checkered space shuttle program in 2011, which failed in its main objectives of making space travel affordable and safe. The agency will have spent more than $8 billion on the commercial crew program by 2024, with the hope that the private sector can take care of NASA's needs in low Earth orbit, so it's freed up to focus on return missions to the moon and then on to Mars. SpaceX, founded by Elon Musk in 2002, leapfrogged its much older rival Boeing, whose program floundered after a failed test of its uncrewed Starliner last year. But SpaceX's success won't mean the U.S. will stop hitching rides with Russia altogether. According to Mr. Bridenstine, the goal is to have, quote, an exchange of seats between American astronauts and Russian astronauts.
That's the word we want to hear. Stay.
That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you for joining us. I am CJ Heroes. See you again tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.